Today's Christian church in America looks and acts differently than past versions of local churches. Ministry has become specialized and segregated. When families come to church, they are separated by age, gender, and interests. We have creative children's ministries, dynamic youth ministries, men's ministries, women's ministries, small groups, interest groups, and a variety of worship services for a variety of people. The church has become the center of the faith development process. Parents have become responsible for transportation and snacks. The church has taken on the role of primary teacher of the faith, while parents are supposed to support the church and the church staff in their role. This is not a biblical model for church, and it certainly is not God's plan for passing the faith on to the next generation. So how did we get here? How did the church arrive at this point in history? It all started during the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries. This revolution affected every aspect of Western culture, from agriculture to manufacturing, from mining to transportation and technology. The use of metal led to new tools, which led to new machines, which changed the way people worked. It changed how many people it took to accomplish jobs, such as plowing a field or manufacturing fabric. This also meant that families no longer needed their children to be working at home. There was, however, still a need for children to contribute to the financial welfare of the family, but the money was no longer on the farm. It was in the city, working in factories, mines, and mills. Once children were at work 12 plus hours a day, 6 days a week, education could no longer take place in the home or in private schools. Enter the first major change in how ministry to children and families took place: the Sunday school. Created by Robert Raikes in England in 1780, the Sunday school model came to the United States in 1785 when William Elliot opened one in Virginia. Over the next several decades, Sunday school popped up all over the East Coast and into the Mississippi Valley. Soon, the idea of teaching children who could no longer go to weekday schools basic education began to shift towards teaching Christian values, ethics, and Bible stories. The Sunday school movement is important to the development of youth and family ministries for several reasons. First, we see for the first time an age-specific ministry within the church. Secondly, we see the concept of faith development and nurture outsourced from the family in the home to the teacher and pastor in the local congregation. The next major development was the creation of the YMCA, followed by the YWCA. Again started in England in 1844, it made its way across the pond in 1851. A history taken from the YMCA webpage. In 1844, industrialized London was a place of great turmoil and despair. For the young men who migrated to the city from rural areas to find jobs, London offered a bleak landscape of tenement housing and dangerous influences. 22-year-old George Williams, a farmer turned department store worker, was troubled by what he saw. He joined 11 friends to organize the first Young Men's Christian Association, a refuge of Bible study and prayer for young men seeking escape from the hazards of life on the streets. Years later, retired Boston Sea Captain Thomas Valentine Sullivan, working as a marine missionary, noticed a similar need to create a safe home away from home for sailors and merchants. Inspired by the stories of the Y in England, he led the formation of the first U.S. YMCA at the Old South Church in Boston on December 29, 1851. Now we have ministry designed for a specific age group that would help protect them from the bad world outside by providing positive Christian influences and peer relationships. By the end of the 19th century, a major social shift happened: the creation of the public high school. In 1875, the United States Supreme Court allowed taxes to be spent on secondary education. By 1918, every state in the Union had adopted high schools and developed attendance policies. This changed the concept of life stages. Prior to the turn of the 20th century, you had two life stages, child and adult. Now you had this middle area, not quite a child, but not an adult either. Enter adolescence. A term and life stage we now accept as normal was not even considered prior to the 20th century. This new life stage brought on new ministry endeavors. Think youth ministry. The first youth ministry movement was called the Society for Christian Endeavor, started by Francis and Harriet Clark as a way for youth to grow in their faith after their conversion experience. The original objective was to promote an earnest Christian life among members while increasing their mutual acquaintances and making them more useful in the service of God. This movement led to various denominational copycats, who added the idea of teaching denominational loyalty to the mix. Groups like the Walther League or Luther League. We are starting to connect the dots from Sunday school to the YMCA through adolescence and into youth ministry. The church is now running age-specific ministries designed to protect our children from the world, giving them Christian friends while teaching them the Christian faith and keeping them loyal to our congregation at best and to our denomination at least. Divide and conquer. This mentality has never been the spoken ministry focus. No one has ever said, let's divide up the family so we can conquer it piece by piece. But look at successful churches at the end of the 20th century. These are the model ideas that most churches were striving for. A dynamic children's ministry with great opportunities for kids to learn about Jesus and things like kids' church or Sunday school, keeping the kids busy and entertained while mom and dad were in big church. The motto, "It's a sin to bore a child," became the rally cry. Youth ministries. What you needed here was a big personality leader, someone who could grab teenagers' attention and hold it long enough to teach them about Jesus. Then you mix in some crazy games that somehow make a teaching point, a state-of-the-art youth room, some good adult mentors, an annual summer mission trip and winter ski retreat, and small groups for teens led by teens. Youth worship, youth Bible studies, youth retreats, youth small groups, youth servant events, youth mission trips, youth leadership. Adults will need you to drive and provide the legal minimum of security. We'll call you a sponsor, so you sound more like a bouncer outside of a nightclub. Adults, well, that's a big category, so we need to break you down. We'll have women's ministry and men's ministry and ministry for married couples and for senior citizens. We'll want some groups that get together around interests, so quilters and singers and bowlers and bunco players and softball enthusiasts. And since our children are away in their special programs, we'll need our own Bible studies and small groups, so we can mature in the faith. To support this vision, churches have hired more and more staff to specialize in more and more ministry offerings. Parachurch organizations have popped up all over the place, offering training and resources for every ministry category one can think of. Families have gotten used to the idea that church should provide services that meet the individual needs of all family members. The reason we trace age-specific ministries designed to protect and nurture our children back only 230 years or so is because you can't go further than that. The concept of divide and conquer emerged slowly over the past few centuries by well-intentioned movements that proved successful in the short term, but have combined to create an ineffective ministry model that is hurting our children and threatens the core of Christianity in the United States. That's a big, bold statement. Luckily, we live in an era of statistics, surveys, and trend watchers. We have more data available to us today than ever before. This data includes a look into the successes and failures of church ministry in the last 50 years. A recent Time magazine article points to research that found 61% of the adults polled who are now in their 20s said they had participated in church activities as teens, but no longer so. A study from UCLA found that almost half of college students drift away from their Christian upbringing, while 52% of incoming students said that they regularly took part in church events. The number shrinks to 29% who are still involved in church activities by their junior year. Josh McDowell estimates over 69% of youth are leaving traditional church after high school. Lifeway Christian Research reports the overwhelming majority of children from evangelical families are leaving the church as they enter adulthood. Mark Matlock finds, depending on whose numbers you use, 58% to 84% of graduating youth from church youth groups are not returning. David Wheaton, author of University of Destruction, states that as many as 50% of Christian students say they have lost their faith after 4 years of college. George Barna gives troubling news in his book Real Teens. Now only 33% of churched youth say that the church will play a part in their lives when they leave home. Glenn Schultz at Lifeway Christian Resources estimates that 75% of young people leave church in their late teens and aren't reconnecting later. Student Venture reports that about 70% of seniors in high school who claimed faith stopped attending church during the college years. Ron Luce, in A Battle Cry for a Generation, estimates 88% of kids raised in Christian homes do not continue to follow the Lord after they graduate from high school. George Barna, in his book Real Teens, says, while youth ministry has become a standard ministry program in tens of thousands of churches, there has been surprising little growth in the involvement of teenagers in the life of the church over the past decade. Think about this. Over the last 30 years, the number of youth ministries, youth pastors, and full-time youth workers has grown dramatically. Included in that time is the plethora of new youth ministry books, magazines, resources, camps, music, and so on. But during that same 30 years, the number of teens sticking with their faith after high school has dropped. Up to 88% of teenagers involved in youth ministries will drop out of the church and their faith after high school. Now we are in the second decade of the 21st century, and people are starting to ask some serious questions. These questions are born out of frustrations that come from trying to be all things to all people all the time. Like, why are our numbers going down with the more diverse ministry offerings? Why is it that no matter what we do, there is a missing demographic? It used to be the 20-somethings would take a decade off of church, but then return when they got married and had kids and grew up. But they seem to be leaving at the same rate, but not returning at a much lower rate. Why is it that the more we offer, the more is demanded of us as church leaders and paid staff? What do we do with all these ministries now that the church is shrinking, the down economy is hurting our budget, and we can't afford all the professional staff to keep these things running? And the biggest question? How have we gotten away from God's plan for ministry in the church? And how can we get back on track? The church needs a reformation.